there's a song. You already know which one. Not your favorite exactly. The one you don't listen to so much as disappear into. Name it. Bet me the year. 1,891 people just did that. In 2025, in the journal Memory, the release years made a curve. It peaked at 17. Not a year. An age, yours. So why 17? And why does that same experiment answer differently for the person sitting next to you? Nobody can tell you yet, but stay, and you'll know what your number was really measuring. Because the year was never the answer. Take the year you just bet, and subtract the year you were born. I'd bet you just landed somewhere between 15 and 20. That's the number that mattered, not the one you bet. And for a lot of people watching this, that subtraction just came out negative. Your song is older than you are, but it already has a name. Nostalgia is a mood. What you're carrying has edges. Researchers call it the reminiscence bump. In one study, 470 people went through 111 popular songs and rated the memories that came up. The listeners ranged from 18 to 82. The songs spanned 1950 to 2015. Those memories piled into a window. Other work finds the same lopsided window for people's favorite films and books, and for the memories they rank as most important. So whatever you want to call it, you're describing a curve other people can draw. But that curve does something a teenage brain can't explain. There are 3 locks on this door, and each one is stranger than the last. The first is the window. Why this stretch of years and not any other? The second is the owner. Which songs get in? And which ones from those exact same charts get nothing? And the third is the origin. Why a person is built to have a window like this at all. But before the first lock, there's something in this data that doesn't fit any of them. There's a second peak in the data, not on people's own teenage years, on music from their parents' young adulthood, decades before they were born, a room they were never in. A small study spotted it first. 62 college students at one American university, and a much larger one in 2025 found it again. The researchers think it's handed down, that you absorbed it from a kitchen radio and a car stereo before you had any say in the matter. You can be homesick for an era you never lived through. I've known about this finding for weeks. It still gets me. But look what it does to the tidy explanation. If this were a teenage brain welding in whatever happened to be playing, you couldn't love an era that finished before you existed. But people do. So whatever this is, it isn't only happening inside a 17-year-old. The window is real though. So let's look at it properly. Ask a 60-year-old for memories. Any memories. And they don't come back evenly spread. Roughly ages 10 to 30 produce the most of them. Not just the most vivid too, and the ones people rank as most important. I want to be careful with that word roughly. Ask one way and you get about 10 to 30. Cue people with single words and it stretches down to 5. Ask them to describe a typical life and it runs to 39. It's method dependent, not a fixed biological constant. It's a smear, but it's a stubborn smear. In 2005, researchers compared lifespan memory curves across Japan, China, Bangladesh, England, and the United States. What people remembered differed by culture. When they remembered, it didn't. Now, same timing everywhere narrows the explanations. It doesn't pick one. Identity forms at similar ages everywhere too. But the newest and largest look at this refuses to give the tidy answer. So, those 1,891 people. The study came out of the University of Jyväskylä in Finland, led by Ibaya Burunat. The researchers report participants from 84 countries. Everyone named one piece of music of profound personal meaning. One. But what they found isn't the clean story. They found 3 bumps overlapping in the same data. The cascading bump for the parents' era, the reminiscence bump peaking at 17, and a recency bump. Older people naming music released recently as deeply meaningful. And the mix depended on who you were. In this one sample, men's peak came earlier and stayed anchored right there into old age. Women's came later and carried a stronger pull toward recent music, one that grew as they got older. Be careful with that, because it's a measured distribution and nothing more. It's not a statement about what men are or what women are, and the researcher who ran it is careful about it herself. In her own words, without richer data from the participants, She can only speculate about why. This is what one 2025 study found. It's new and nobody has independently repeated it yet. But somebody bigger already looked and got the opposite. 2 years earlier, somebody ran this much bigger. 4,824 people, 102 countries, 24,000 songs. And on that difference between men and women, nothing at all. They reported the bump in both sexes and no difference between them. What they did find was the bump everywhere. Every age group, every country surveyed. It wasn't confined to particular genres either. The researchers call it, in their words, biologically and culturally ubiquitous. So the bigger sample says no, the newer sample says yes, and nobody has settled it. I find that more interesting than a clean answer because it tells you how young this whole question still is. And the shape is universal. That doesn't tell us why. So if the shape is everywhere but the peak moves with the person, stop looking at the songs. Look at the owner. That's lock 2. The owner. This is the experiment the whole thing rests on. Claire Rathbone and her colleagues ran it in 2017. They took adults over 40, handed them lists of top-grossing hits, and asked them to pick out the ones that were personally significant. Those songs formed a bump. Textbook. Then the researchers looked at the songs each person left behind, off the very same lists. Flat. No bump at all. Same chart, same month, same era. One set of songs is load-bearing and the other set is wallpaper. And the only difference is which ones happened to be there while you were becoming someone. So the songs were never the unit. The self was. And the same researcher had shown that 9 years earlier. Ask people to write out their own I am statements. I am a runner. I am somebody's daughter. The memories each one cues cluster around the age that self-image first appeared. Now that one wasn't about songs. It was about memory in general. The music study is that same finding, just made of songs. So the song isn't a souvenir of who you were. It's a brick you built with it. Both things are true here though. A 2024 study looked at 75 older adults, all between 65 and 80. The researchers controlled for how familiar each song felt, and music from middle childhood, ages 5 to 9, opened autobiographical memories too. That points some of the credit back toward plain exposure. It doesn't disprove the teenage window, and it needs repeating in younger and larger samples. That pushes the question back a step. Why is a self being assembled then at all? Deep Dive 3. The origin. That leaves the third lock. The origin. Adolescence is when a human being switches sides. Across cultures, it's the stretch where you stop taking your cues from your family and start taking them from your peers. Researchers call it the biological embedding of culture. More sensation-seeking, more sensitivity to what your own age group thinks of you. And music is one of the main instruments teenagers use. What you play announces who you're with. One honest note. These studies are about social learning in general, not about musical memory. The link to the bump is plausible. It hasn't been demonstrated, but that isn't the explanation you've heard. The one you've heard is about the brain. A 2024 review argues adolescence is a window when music simply counts for more, so it gets encoded harder. This is the explanation you'll hear most often. It's plausible, and it's built on real findings. But the researchers who proposed it say plainly that it hasn't been tested yet. And the reward sensitivity finding people reach for isn't about music. Teenage brains reacted harder than children's or adults in a study of rewards. 37 people, only 13 of them teenagers. And the reward was money. So there's a ceiling on all of it. Nobody has shown any benefit to having a reminiscence bump, or that it was selected for. The bump may be a side effect of a learning window that exists for entirely other reasons. One more piece of honesty, my favorite. The whole idea of a developmental window comes from animal experiments on vision. Applying it to your record collection is a leap, and it's one scientists make carefully. Scientists are still arguing too. One review screened 523 studies and came out with 4 camps and no winner. The identity account, the one we've been building, drew the most support, but the cultural life script account drew a lot too. And it's deflating. It says the bump partly reflects a shared story about when life is supposed to happen. First love, leaving home, the big firsts. And it shows up in imagined lives. Ask people what a hypothetical 70-year-old will remember, and the invented memories bunch into the same decades. That would mean this is partly about how you search your memory, not how you stored it. But none of that touches the belief you actually walked in here with, which is this. The music from when I was 17 really was better. I grew up in the golden age, and I can hear the difference. If one era were superior, everyone's bump would sit on it. But across 4,824 people in 102 countries, across genres and both sexes, it moves when you move. It tracks your birthday, not the calendar. So the era can't be doing the work on its own. And you carry a bump for music released before you were born. Nobody gets two golden ages. But here's the part that stings. The bump shows up for favorite books and films as well as albums, and it's biggest for albums. The researcher's explanation is resampling. You played those songs hundreds, maybe thousands of times across 30 years. You never reread the book that often. Now, resampling makes the bump bigger. It isn't the whole reason it's there, but some of the sacredness is mileage. So the songs didn't win a quality contest. They won a timing contest. And then you spent 30 years rigging the rematch. I don't want to push that further than it goes, though. The opposite isn't proven either. There's a famous analysis of 55 years of popular music that gets quoted as proof music got worse. They measured what changed. They made no judgment about whether any of it was better. And that number everyone repeats, that your taste freezes at 33, that's a music company's blog post from 2015. The method was never published, and it measures what people streamed, not what they were still able to love. Streaming less new music while you're raising kids and holding down a job is a life circumstance story, not a brain story. Carol Krumhansel, who found the parents' bump, names the rival explanation herself. Maybe 60s music really is of higher quality. She can't exclude it. Neither can I. Nobody has run the experiment that would prove music got worse, and that absence is itself telling. But the 2025 data found something kinder, that recency bump. Older people naming recent music as profoundly meaningful. It sits alongside the bump. It doesn't replace it. It's a snapshot of different people at different ages, not the same people followed across a lifetime. Still, you didn't stop at 17. So 3 things are true at once. The songs from 17 really are privileged. The bump is real, and it holds across 102 countries. The 17 is newer than that. It comes from one 2025 study, and nobody has repeated it yet. They're privileged less because they were good than because they were there while you were assembling a self. That's why the songs from those same charts, the ones you never happened to make yours, do nothing at all. They were available. Nobody recruited them, and you never actually stopped. Put on the song you named at the start. It still does the thing, but now you know what's doing it. It's a 17-year-old, still in there, still holding the brick they were handed. You weren't collecting music, you were building with it. Which leaves one question I can't answer. Somewhere right now, there's a kid with a radio on in a kitchen, soaking up a decade they'll never live through. And if the researchers are right about where that comes from, whose 17 are they inheriting? Record this as a separate clip. It sits after the fade on a beat of silence, so nothing steps on the final image. If the hidden machinery under ordinary human life is your kind of strange, that's all oddly human does. There's always another one.